Welcome to Crossroads. The Chinese regime is looking at new tactics to try to take Taiwan by force. Now, among the methods now being proposed within China is the creation of what they're calling a shadow government, and they want to use this to seize control over the country from within. This tactic would be used to make the smooth regime transition within Taiwan were the CCP to try to take over the country. Now, this plan was revealed in a now deleted document titled Start Taiwan Takeover Preparations as Soon as Possible. And this was written by unnamed researchers at China's Xiamen University Cross-Strait Institute of Urban Planning, and it was pulled from Chinese social media after it was shared. The DC-based think tank, Center for Strategic and International Studies, they obtained a copy of it. Now, this piece from China has two key suggestions in it. It says this, quote, first, set up a central Taiwan work committee as soon as possible. The sole objective of this body will be to serve as a, quote, shadow government that can enter Taiwan at any time to take over the regime on the other side of the strait. Meaning, again, crossing the Taiwan Strait, taking over Taiwan from China. And they note the purpose of the establishment of this committee, stating it would be to, quote, gain familiarity with Taiwan's current systems, institutions, and laws as soon as possible. And they state it would carry out targeted intelligence gathering on and in-depth analysis, understanding, and tracking of the current status and historical evolution of these institutions. And it says also, quote, to bring together the anti-Taiwan independence forces on the island. Now it says the, quote, reunification forces on the island have weakened in recent years. By that they mean, of course, the factions within Taiwan who would want to have Taiwan basically merge with the CCP, right? That's what they call reunification. They say these forces in Taiwan have weakened in recent years, and real expectations of reunification and practical institutional vehicles for this are lacking. It says the establishment of the Central Taiwan Work Committee, again this shadow government, could take these forces and integrate them into national activity, and the anti-Taiwan independence forces would become systematic and institutionalized. So in other words, what they're saying here is the CCP, in this proposal, they want to take the factions in Taiwan that want, quote-unquote, reunification, that want Taiwan to merge with China, and basically integrate them into this plan they have to take Taiwan by force. And then they want to use this organization and to use what they call national activity, right? In other words, they want to mobilize them in order to start this process. Now, another reason they want to set up this whole regime change system is this. They say, quote, to smooth the impact of regime change, the relevant departments of the Central Taiwan Work Committee should allow the island's elites and institutions to participate in the design of the Taiwan takeover plans as much as possible. Allowing Taiwanese society to feel that they participated in the regime handover plans will greatly reduce the cost of actual governance in the future and form a mainstream consensus in society. Now, in other words, this sounds like a color revolution. They want to activate forces in Taiwan, use these forces as kind of the main system to do this transition, and then make the Taiwanese people feel that they did it themselves. That this wasn't the Chinese Communist Party doing it, because it happened locally within Taiwan, again through what the CCP would regard as a shadow government. Now it says here on the second suggestion, quote, to establish a Taiwan governance experimental zone as soon as possible. The recent unrest in Hong Kong has shown that the one country, two systems approach and full acceptance of the existing systems is not necessarily suitable for Taiwan. Now, when they say one country, two systems, what they're referring to is this. The Chinese Communist Party used to have an agreement, with the handover of Hong Kong from the British government back to China. The agreement was one country, two systems, one China, two governments. And the original agreement was Hong Kong would maintain basically a British legal system. They would maintain what looked like a democratic government, and the CCP wouldn't touch that. One country, two systems. The problem the CCP has, though, is because it demonstrated that doesn't work. The Chinese Communist Party took Hong Kong by force and ended that agreement prematurely. Taiwan watched that take place, and when that happened, there was a landslide vote in Taiwan going against the Chinese Communist Party and the pro-CCP factions. In other words, they saw what the type of agreement leads to, and so this paper is actually saying that wouldn't work for Taiwan now. But here's what they say. They say for Taiwan, the aim from the outset should be full integration into the mainland. In other words, they just want to do an outright full takeover, do what they did to Hong Kong from the very start, right? End that agreement from the very start, and then have a transition period to manage that process. And one other thing important from the piece itself, it says this: reunification is just the beginning, and governance will be the standard for testing whether reunification is successful. Now, look, it seems this would be what the CCP would attempt to put in place were it to take Taiwan by force. This would be a fake government that would be in power to help transition the country after a CCP takeover. So what this essentially means is this. The Chinese Communist Party, imagine its boats roll up on the shore, they win a war, they take over Taiwan. Then what happens? Well, they'd have this shadow government step forward, right? It looks like it's just Taiwanese people interested in the future of Taiwan, and they say, you know what? The Taiwanese people need to have a say in this, and we represent the Taiwanese people. Secretly, the Chinese Communist Party had already set them up. They're puppeteering both sides of this. The CCP might say, well, you know, we disagree with it because you're part of China now, but we'll let you have your say. And this other puppet they have, this shadow government, would say, well, we believe that we need this policy and that policy, and we need to maintain this and that because that's who the Taiwanese people are. Then the Taiwanese people, according to this analysis, the CCP believes they would recognize this as their voice. They would view this as being the system that represents their interests. They'd get behind it, and then when that shadow government takes over the country as the official government, they would trust it. That is what the CCP is planning to do, at least according to this. Now look, of course, the Chinese Communist Party would have to take Taiwan first. And I've discussed before one of the bigger threats Taiwan would face. It's color revolution. Now, I noted previously, in fact, I did a whole special feature on Taiwan and the recent elections, that you actually do have some forces in Taiwan, different factions, that are more in favor of, business and trade relations or even opening up with China, the mainland, right? You have a lot of people then who vote against this idea of reunification. But for a lot of people, they kind of fall in the middle. For a lot of people, they just think, okay, we need to have trade with China, and they believe that the talk of maybe outright independence from China inhibits that kind of trade, right? It damages business people. What you have then is, of course, three different parties. The current incumbent party, the one that just won re-election, they're more about independence, being independent from China, and their big platform was heavily on that. They're more of like kind of a liberal party. Their policies are more progressive. Meanwhile, the Kuomintang, the KMT, they're more the conservative party, but they're in favor of maybe closer relations with China. And then you have the TPP. Now, the TPP, the third party, and of course the KMT, the more conservative one, they're more in favor of business with China, of kind of talking with China, having better relations with the mainland. And they oppose the idea of talking about outright independence because they think that's a red line and they shouldn't do it. The issue you had was this. The DPP won the elections, but the other two parties, if you combine them, they would have had the popular vote. And so there is a pretty broad swath of people within Taiwan who would be in favor of kind of maybe having some relations with China, not being totally independent and not talking about that. The concern you would have then, and what seems to be the basis of the CCP analysis, is they want to take advantage of that. Take advantage of people who maybe don't want total independence, maybe don't want to be totally integrated with China all over. They're kind of in the middle. And so what do? Well, you start a color revolution. You find factions within the country to maybe do protests on the streets. You find factions within the country to create propaganda, to work as agents. People who pretend to represent certain interests of the moderates, but in reality, their real agenda is on the extreme, with the CCP working them like, puppets on a string, essentially. And the Chinese Communist Party could, by starting up popular movements, create this kind of call for change and this call for reunification, and then have this group set up that process to manage a transition to bring the CCP into power while maintaining the illusion that Taiwan did it themselves. That would be a color revolution. Now, what's interesting with this report is it seems that that's what they're planning to do. Now, what would a shadow government look like? Well, that ties into what the Chinese Communist Party calls its United Front Work Department. And one of the key strategies, the tactics of the United Front, is to control what they call civil society. This would mean shifting the allegiances of civil society away from the official government and towards the shadow government. In other words, like this. The United Front is basically the front line of Chinese Communist Party operations in other countries. They have them in New York, they have them in San Francisco, they have them in Paris, they have them in Taiwan. The Chinese Communist Party often runs these through the Chinese consulates. They work through Chinese associations which then interface with government, media, influencer circles, business circles. They get into the influencer parts of the society and then try to spread the CCP's narratives or get people compromised within the CCP system, whether it's honey traps or bribes or just surface level business deals. That's what they do. Now, the strategy the CCP has, right, capturing what they call the civil society, is based on this theory. What is a government? What establishes governance? Well, you have the civil society, right, the influencers, who are, again, the people who represent a society. Your business leaders, your social media, celebrities, your journalists, your Hollywood directors, your, again, politicians, right? All the people who represent the people of a country. That's your civil society. The government is the official government, right? The federal government in the US, the Taiwanese government in Taiwan. The government, of course, relies on civil society because the relationship of government and the people that forms a country is that relationship. But if you can shift the allegiance of civil society away from the incumbent government and towards a new power, it means that you've actually captured that country, meaning the people, the civil society, the basketball stars, the celebrities, the politicians in some cases, the journalists, the big business leaders. They want to have something that goes against the interests of the country. They want to align more towards China. While the CCP then controls the country. And when they control these people lobby the official government and make them change positions more in favor of this. This is the strategy the Chinese Communist Party uses to capture societies. And you can see it to an extent in the United States. Look at the businesses lobbying our own government, right? In terms of policies favorable towards more trade with China. Look, for example, at the Hollywood film studios censoring on behalf of Chinese law. Look, for example, at the NBA teams and so on that have favorable policies towards China and will even punish players if they say bad things about the Chinese Communist Party. Look at the journalists who can't speak openly lest they be kicked out of China and their entire media will be punished. The CCP, using business interests because they believe that the weakness of the capitalist system is material interest, look at how they're manipulating personal interest as a tool to capture the civil society. That is how the United Front works. Now in Taiwan, again, still the US is one of its main trading partners, but the Chinese Communist Party, China is one of their biggest ones as well. They've been able to manipulate that to an extreme extent, and they want to use that as part of their system to take over the country. Now, what's particularly interesting about this whole plan is that it could use pro-unification individuals already in Taiwan to help plan this takeover. Now, of course, this all has to do with the Chinese Communist Party's strategy on transitioning Taiwan after a takeover, or of again starting a color revolution to help facilitate that. But there's still the issue of the takeover itself. And interestingly, the United States is working with Taiwan to push back against this, including on what they call gray zone tactics. I'll be talking more about this after we go back from a quick break.
Experts agree. One of the best ways to protect against financial uncertainty is to diversify your portfolio. Learn how physical gold and silver can secure your retirement funds from today's economic challenges with a gold IRA from American Hartford Gold. You can safeguard your wealth with no penalties or taxes when you transfer your current qualifying retirement accounts. Call now and our precious metals specialists will send you a free information kit, no cost or obligation. American Hartford Gold, a trusted industry leader with an A+ from the Better Business Bureau, has a 5-star rating from thousands of happy clients. Whether you are getting physical precious metals in a gold IRA or delivered to your doorstep, we offer only the highest quality gold and silver. For your peace of mind, we also offer a no-fee buyback commitment, a low-price guarantee, along with free shipping and free insurance. So don't wait. Call the number on your screen today and secure your financial future.
Welcome back. One of the main goals of the Chinese Communist Party is to take Taiwan by force. Now, among the methods now being proposed within China is the creation of a so-called shadow government, and that can be used to seize control over the country from the inside. This was revealed in a now deleted document titled Start Taiwan Takeover Preparations as Soon as Possible. This was written by unnamed researchers at China's Xiamen University, their Cross-Strait Institute of Urban Planning. And what's particularly interesting about this plan is that it could use, quote, pro-unification individuals already in Taiwan to help plan and facilitate this takeover, meaning they want to actually use people in Taiwan as a shadow government and puppeteer them to make them this kind of new system to take over the country were China, the Chinese Communist Party, to conquer it from the other side. Now, of course, it has to do with the CCP strategy on transitioning Taiwan after a takeover, but there's still the issue of the takeover itself. The United States right now is working to push back against this, including notably with going after what they call gray zone tactics. Fox News said this. They said over the next few years, the People's Republic of China will continue to target democratic, self-ruled Taiwan with, quote, gray zone tactics and what they call an anaconda strategy, slow strangulation efforts that seek to force Taipei, Taiwan, to bow to Beijing without drastic measures such as an invasion. They note that experts say China will escalate its efforts to disrupt the island's economy by targeting critical industries and infrastructure and scale up covert cyber war operations that provide Beijing with just enough cover to maintain plausible deniability. They note a recent U.S. war game team from the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, a nonpartisan research institute, visited Taiwan in early August to hold the first ever tabletop exercise focusing on economic and cyber coercion from China against Taiwan. Now, note that this team pointed out that the cost of launching a cyber attack, for example, is significantly lower than the cost of defending against it. This asymmetry, right, unconventional warfare type systems, allows China to exert considerable pressure on Taiwan without triggering direct U.S. military response. And that's what we refer to as, again, gray zone. There's the line that would constitute, you cross it, you're going to war, right? There's this line that if you cross it, it makes the U.S. military respond, the U.S. has to defend its ally, and the Chinese Communist Party doesn't want that. But right before that line, there's what they call short of war tactics or gray zone warfare tactics. You're not technically doing things that would, again, institute a declaration of war, but you're coming close to it. And they're noting that there's a lot of different strategies you can use without actually crossing that line. Cyber attacks, for example, trade war, business warfare, political warfare, united front type tactics, color revolution tactics, all of that would fall within the gray zone. And what the U.S. is doing now is helping Taiwan defend against these types of tactics. Now, on Taiwan's side, it seems the military believes the Chinese Communist Party would not be able to take the country if they tried invading it outright. And if a takeover were to happen, the Chinese Communist Party would have to do it through other means. I'll be talking more about what the CCP is threatening only on EpicTV.com. So if you're watching on YouTube, Facebook, X, Rumble, there's a link in the description below. Click on that. you'll get access to the rest of this episode and also our whole library of shows and also our hard-hitting documentaries and issues that really matter, like the Chinese Communist Party's 100-year plan to defeat the United States. The CCP is one of the biggest threats to America. They're using things like propaganda, video games, entertainment, movies, culture to subvert and influence the next generation. This unrestricted war against our country is one of the scariest but least understood issues of our time because it's not tangible. It's being done through soft power and ideological subversion. If you want to learn more about what exactly the CCP is plotting against America, watch my documentary, The Final War, the 100-year plot to defeat America. You can find the link in the description below, and I'll show you all a trailer before we go exclusively to epictv.com for the rest of this episode. I'll see you there.
The greatest threat facing the United States is the CCP.
The Epoch Times investigation team had studied the CCP for years, but what we uncovered was yielding evidence beyond our imagination.
With Chairman Mao, with the Prime Minister, our talks have been characterized by frankness.
The Clinton administration said, oh, don't worry about it. This will be a poison pill for China.
China's strategic goal is to make sure that the U.S. has 4 enemies, and one of them must be a terrorist group.
We are giving of our life's blood so that the Chinese Communist Party can survive and thrive.